Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. Uh, we have some really great speakers here for you today, and I'm going to hand it over to Trudy Curtis, who is the CEO of PPDM, to welcome you and get you all started.
Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to have everybody online on this session today. I hope that you can see us and hear us without any difficulty. I'm really excited about our sessions today because I've been working in data for really all of my career, which spans about 46 years at this point. So it's been a really, really long time that I've been working with data. And this program we think is really important to help people to understand how data competencies can help you to land a job, can help you to move between jobs, set career paths that are interesting to you, and help you to do things that are really beneficial in the long term. So we're going to get started here. Online we have Kim Oracheski. Kim joins us from Strathcona Resources and is going to tell us about the work she's done. And we also have Stephen Werny. Stephen Werny works for Geologic Systems and is responsible for hiring people with data competencies. So we're going to speak to somebody who has moved into data competencies as part of their career and to somebody who's been hiring people with those data competencies. And we're going to start off with Kim. And Kim, I think you're going to start off by telling us a little bit about your career path and what your journey looked like for you. So why don't you go ahead and take that off? And while you talk, folks, if you have questions, there's a Q&A function here. Please type them into the Q&A. Blaine will watch them with devoted attention and make sure that we answer them attentively. But we do want to know what you think. This is your session. Okay, Kim, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Trudy. I put together a couple slides just because I'm a bit of a visual person. So my name is Kim Oracheski. For the purposes of this webinar, I am the career transitioner. I started my career in engineering and I've moved into a data role as a data analyst about 7 years ago. And I think at this point, I've been in data longer than I've been in engineering. So that's a bit of my background. And yeah, for my career path, for education, I've actually got 2 degrees. I started with a double major in chemistry and mathematical sciences before I moved into chemical engineering. And through the engineering leg of that journey, I've interned at various oil and gas companies, mostly upstream. Devon Energy, I worked in production. Tourmaline, I worked in completions and production. Upon graduation, I started with Trican Well Service for a more technical role, more field-based role. Following that, I worked at Murphy Oil in drilling and completions, and then I moved over to Kona Resources as an operations analyst. And this is sort of where I started working with quite a lot of data. And shortly after, Kona merged with Strath to become Strathcona. We've grown quite a lot since then. That was 7 years ago. So yeah, and I'm now part of the data team. I helped stand up the data strategy here at Strathcona. So it's been a really, really interesting journey. So yeah, as the description kind of implied, I didn't start my career in data. I don't have a computer science degree. In fact, my one introduction level comp sci class that I had to take for chemical engineering was my worst class. I absolutely hated it. I barely passed. I think I maybe got like a C-, which was what you needed just to get the credits. And I hated it. I didn't know what I would ever do with it. I didn't really get it. So kind of ironically now that is, yeah, more of my day-to-day than I was expecting. Yeah, so my background's in engineering and energy specifically. Yeah, I mean, I kind of got into data just because I was trying to solve a lot of the problems that we have as engineers. So for me, data was the tool. It was never really the goal, although as I've really got really deep into it, I just got better at it, and then I just became the person that people came to with data questions. I started using data kind of in my role with drilling and completions at Murphy Oil. We were asked to bring together a lot of data sets. So we had our financial data, our operations data, the public data, and they all came out from exports in various places and different spreadsheets that I had to kind of somehow bring together and make sense of. So that's when I started learning how to make dashboards. You know, as you've seen with my education, I went to school for 8 years almost. And it was a little disappointing to graduate, and you know, as a new grad, you know, you have to pay your dues, you have to do your time, so you kind of get all of the crunch work that nobody wants, which is usually dealing with all of the data. And but kind of, yeah, just in that moment, I told myself I didn't go to school for 8 years to copy and paste all day every day. So I set out to try to make the work a lot more efficient so that I could actually do engineering work rather than just copying and pasting all day before I can get to any kind of insight. So if you're out there in your careers, or if you're just trying to start out and you're trying to figure out how you'd transition into data, you're probably already doing a lot of data work. So you know, in most roles, you're asked to build Excel reports or track KPIs, and in data terminology, that's called data visualization and reporting. When you're combining information from multiple sources, you can kind of transition that skill into what's called ETL, extract, transform, and load, and data modeling. Kind of once you've gotten the meat of your data sorted, finding patterns in operational data is, you know, considered exploratory data analysis, and that's where your expertise really comes in. And yeah, going through engineering, I really didn't expect to be creating as many presentations as I did, but that was a huge part of my role as well. I was actually in PowerPoint almost as much as I was in Excel, and in data terms, that's storytelling. So you're probably already doing a lot of the core work that would help you grow into some sort of data skill. Yeah, and I wanted to bring up this point. I think the technical skills are very learnable. You know, you kind of learn them piece by piece, and either, like they said, they're tools that help you solve business problems. And you just get better at it the more you use it. I think looking back, the hardest part wasn't really learning the technology. It wasn't learning how to code. It was trying to find the time to invest in, you know, better long-term solutions while still trying to meet my deadlines. So, you know, we're always battered with deadlines. Things always need to be done the next day or the next day, and it's easy to just want to try to do it the fast way rather than try to do it in like what I'd call the right way, which would help you be more efficient long term. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge for me as I was trying to grow my technical skills. Yeah, and so kind of in my 7 years at Strathcona, I think what we value bigger than any of the teachable skills are kind of the soft skills, like how well a person communicates, how well they can manage stakeholders, understanding business processes, understanding business context, and just asking good questions to do better analysis. We've brought in, you know, many really young people, and they're so sharp and so bright and just so eager to learn, and those have been our biggest successes. Like our most effective analysts are the ones who are just learning kind of these technical skills, but have that core skill set already. I think so. Yeah, through what I've kind of done with my career, I haven't been in the industry very long, definitely not as long as Trudy, but as you can see, I've had a lot of different segmented jobs. So it's, you know, I graduated into downturn 2014, and I've just tried to find whatever work I can to build my engineering skills. So I just feel like kind of that in this point, I kind of feel like I'm not much of an engineer, but I'm not really a technical data person. But where I find my value in our team and in our company is being somewhat of like a bridge or a translator. So understanding the business, what they're trying to do, understanding their pain points, and then understanding how to communicate that to the people who are technical and would do like kind of, the nitty gritty for when it comes to data. And yeah, as I mentioned, I wrote kind of circled in the corner, most valuable people in data aren't always the best programmers, and definitely on our team, I think the most valuable people are the ones who can translate the business context. Yeah. All right, so kind of to summarize, do I need a degree in data science? No, I think start by answering the questions within your current role and use data to solve that to make your job easier. Am I too old to switch careers? Definitely not. It's never too late, and your experience is really your biggest advantage. How much coding do I need? Again, as I've mentioned from my failures in my comp sci class, pretty much 0 to start. I wouldn't say you need 0 to succeed. I've got a couple of suggestions for ways to build some of your coding skills. But I think what's important is just to focus on solving the problem with the tools you already have, and then coding and programming really helps you scale those solutions. And how do I get my first opportunity? Just acting as a translator for your current department, trying to look at the big picture rather than chase the next deadline. I think that presents a lot of new value and new opportunities for your current team. And I think I'll mention AI just because we're always hearing about AI. AI really makes human context more valuable, not less. I think, as great as AI is, you still need people who can interpret the information and make the decisions. But what you could use AI for is a tool to make yourself more efficient and, to expedite a lot of your work. But yeah, the direction really comes from a person. And I will confess that most of these slides were created by AI. Obviously, I didn't just tell AI to build me something. I gave it some inputs, and I steered the direction on what I wanted it to look like. So yeah, kind of to wrap up, if you're wondering whether you're qualified to start exploring a data career, you're probably a lot closer than you think. You're probably already building a lot of the skill sets that you need. Most of us don't start with technical expertise. We start by being curious, solving problems, and looking for better ways to work. And I think the most important thing here is that the tools can be learned. It's mindset that matters. So that's kind of my quick little insight from my career journey. And I wanted to share some learning materials that I think helped me. Just kind of obviously you can't go from no coding into a full data role. So I do think it's important to learn basic querying. So SQL, Python are definitely recommended. These are some links, and I think Blaine can probably circulate them afterwards. But the first two are Learn SQL, Learn Python. They're just like, they're like web pages. They're good reference materials. They have a good table of contents, so you can kind of find the topic that you want. And then the third one is by a really great organization called EDX. It's more of like a syllabus lecture style course. It is still self-paced. So if you've got, some extra time and you want to learn it, I would highly recommend some of these. As far as practical tools that I think are being used in industry, between Databricks and Snowflake, I think most shops, if they have a data lake, they're using one of the two. I think Databricks, and I'm biased because that's what we use, but I think it's really getting ahead of the competition when it comes to data warehouses, data lakes. And they offer a lot of free resources. So you can actually get a free edition of Databricks. And from what I'm told, it's got almost the exact functionality as real Databricks, with like some limitations on the compute. So you might not be able to process as much data. Like you can probably connect to APIs or different databases just to try it out. But you can't, bring in like a full enterprise system. But it's a really great place to just really see what it does and how to use it, build your skill sets in Databricks. And they also offer a couple of learning resources. The middle one is some training resources. I have a couple on the next slide that I would recommend if you wanted to really get your hands into Databricks and just build some of that skill set. And they also have a formal certification program. I think it's free to learn. And then if you want the certification, you just pay the small fee and you could say that you've got the certification. All right, so on the next slide, I highlighted 4 that I think are really good places to start if you're just trying to transition and trying to build basic data skills. So what I would do is just select training and then go through these. They do have webinars. I've never actually been able to see one, and it's all in different time zones, and it's just never worked out for me, so I can't really speak to them. But I'm pretty sure these are all free, so you should, try them out and just kind of get your hands on those. And then the last one that I suggest, they're certification courses. They're called MicroMasters by EDX. It's free to learn. You could take all of these courses, and if you want a certification, you can pay and get a certificate. But if you're just here to learn, these are really great tools. It's self-paced learning. But if you do end up wanting, down the road to do a master's program, like I think Georgia Tech has a master's program in data and analytics, you can get credits for that program if you've completed this and paid to get the certification. So if you're just here to learn, I think it's great. It's a great resource. But if you want to do more formal education down the road, that's also really, really helpful as well. And the last thing I don't have a slide for because I don't think there's any links yet, but PPDM is offering courses. I think I'm not sure what the cost is, Trudy.
They're free.
They're free? Okay. So once they have more details, I'm sure they'll get circulated. So just keep an eye out on those. And I believe they're in person. So I think what I've kind of sent here are just kind of self-paced online learning, but I think there's a huge benefit in attending kind of in-person type of learning session, not just for the knowledge, but also for the networking. So that's sort of my brief career journey and some of my recommendations for those wanting to transition into data.
Okay. Thank you for that. I just put into the chat the 5 classes that we'll be offering as a part of this program. You have a question, Kim. Can you speak more about the data job market currently as it's sitting in Calgary and in Alberta in general? Do you have any information about that?
I feel like Steve might have better information, but kind of from my point of view, we're always looking for, people wanting to do data and wanting to transition. I think those are great skills that we're looking for at Strathcona. And we're not specifically looking for people with a data education. We're just looking for people who understand business context and are able to understand data or able to learn data.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Kim. So that might be a great segue into Stephen to talk about, as an employer, what's he looking for in terms of competencies, capabilities, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely, and great job, Kim. And I'll just probably begin by saying that you're probably going to hear a lot of the similar themes coming from me, and that's great. And Kim and I did not collaborate on this going in, so I was really happy to hear some of the themes that I was going to touch on as well. So maybe just as a brief start to this, if anyone does happen to stumble upon my profile on LinkedIn, as for instance, you might notice that I have actually a background in graphic design. So I really took a bit of an unusual route to getting here. But I came out of school as a graphic designer, worked in that field for a brief amount of time. Wasn't really for me. Ended up going to Japan to teach English for a bit. It was only going to be 6 months, turned into 2 years. But with my teaching background, I actually got a foot in the door at Geologic, where I am now 18 years ago, but who's counting? Almost 19 at this point. But really what got me into data was the sort of the whole aspect of discovery, analysis, and application. The investigation, going out and finding where data might be, identifying the sources, pulling it in, making it as good as it can be, and then making that available to our clients to provide the solutions they need. That whole aspect of it was really intriguing to me, and that's how I kind of got set up on my path. So I had no background in development or programming or anything like that either. It was really just a journey as part of being with Geologic, and I kind of grew up within the company. So that's sort of how I got going. In terms of what we're looking for, and I think might be good to sort of focus on a recent hire that we made to give you guys a sense of what we might be looking for. And I think, Kim made a great point about, the sort of the skills that can be taught versus, what you can bring to the table, because we are looking really for certain traits or characteristics in people. A lot of times you'll see, and we kind of deliberately do this, but we'll make a note in a job posting that, knowledge of oil and gas is, nice to have, but not a requirement. And the reason for that is that, what we're looking for are smart, capable, curious people, right? With an eagerness to learn, and folks who take real pride in being accurate in the work that they do. Those are the kinds of things I think that are more innate to people. And, in terms of learning a program or familiarizing yourself with stuff like that, that'll come. Another thing that we typically look for is, a bit of a history of professional development. So that's a not so subtle hint to some of the links that were provided, right? But if someone has, a resume that shows that they're out there, they're exploring, they're learning, they're building on what they already bring, that shows a kind of willingness to grow that stands out to us, right, when we're looking for people. Because technology is always changing, improving. I'm sure we're going to touch on AI a little later, but the growth and expansion and the way the capabilities have continued to expand at an absurd rate over the last few years. Just points to the way that things can change. You might know a particular program inside and out. It might be obsolete in a year or two, right? So you have to be willing to shift and grow and adjust as it goes. So yeah, I mean, a good example of that was someone, Juliana, who we hired a few years ago. She had no background in oil and gas, no real data development or programming background. She had been working as a part-time accounting and doing accounts payable. But what she did have, she checked a lot of the boxes. She had an extensive history of professional development, lots of courses that she was taking and extra work that she was taking on, back, even then it was, taking advanced Excel courses, learning the basics of some programming language. So those are the kinds of things that we were intrigued by. And then what we do as a company is once we've sort of identified the right person with the right sort of approach and skill set, then what we can do is, and I think maybe a good way to talk this through is to sort of step you through what the first 90 days of onboarding might look like with us is, it's an approach of we do a buddy system. Another trait we look for is communication and teamwork. So, being able to ask the right questions. If you don't know something, ask about it, right? So it's stepping them through, making sure they understand the basics, getting comfortable with the tools that they're going to be using, getting familiar with the process, and then really looking for just that steady rate of improvement over time. Not everybody learns at the same rate. Some people pick it up really fast, some people pick it slower. As long as we're seeing that steady progression, we always feel pretty comfortable that we've got the right person. So broadly speaking, it's a set of characteristics that we're looking for. As I mentioned, industry knowledge is an asset, but not necessarily a requirement. And in the kind of work we do, I'll just reiterate this again. It's things like attention to detail, accuracy, pride in your work, and that curiosity, right? To try to find the solution if it's not right in front of you, and have that initiative to go out and seek a solution and work around. If the way things are being done, if you have an idea of how you can make it better, right? Those are the kinds of things that we're trying to find when we're looking for folks to bring on board. So yeah, I think that's generally speaking the kind of people we're looking for and the kind of types of folks we want to bring in. Now within Geologic, obviously we have a lot of different roles. There's the data acquisition side of it, that I mentioned before about investigating and finding sources and bringing it in. But there's also data developers and database application folks and those kinds of things that may require a specific kind of skill set. You might need to know Oracle really well, or SQL, or some kind of programming language. But there a lot of times, like I said, we can bring those people in and if it's not a specific skill set that we're after, it just comes back to those characteristics, and that's what we're looking for. The other thing I'll mention, and it came up in a previous conversation, but it's really worth, I think, emphasizing here, is the application process itself. Just because I've been through this so much and we've brought so many people on, I can speak fairly confidently to this, that it's really important to tailor your resume and tailor your application to the job you're going for. The idea of sort of just scattershotting a resume to every job opening you find, I can tell you that it's not going to necessarily work out. Carefully read through what folks are looking for and highlight the things in your work history that are going to apply, right? Juliana's a great example of that. We were looking for someone with, again, attention to detail and, accurate data capture and data quality and those kinds of aspects. And she really highlighted those parts of her work history that fit into what we were looking for. And that really helped her resume stand out. We'll get literally, and I'm not joking, hundreds of applications for a job. So you need to find a way to make sure that yours gets noticed. And so taking that extra time to put in that bit of extra effort to make sure that your resume really speaks to the position, it's really, really important. So
Can I add something, Steve?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing that I found to be really effective is if you don't have a ton of experience, but you've done you built apps or you've done hackathons or datathons, what I've seen is that's really effective is a GitHub link next to your under your name on your resume. So people would click on that link and just see the cool projects that you've worked on. And it just shows that you're genuinely interested. Because I mean, if you're a new grad or a newcomer to the country and you don't have a ton of experience, showing that you're actually interested and actually capable is super valuable.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. We've seen, and actually we've got recently, I kind of picked Juliana as an example, someone outside of sort of the typical pipeline, but we have had a lot of success with SAIT folks who have gone through the petroleum engineering program, for instance, and a lot of those people include their capstone project. So that's another example of kind of just highlighting the kind of stuff that you can do outside of a job, but that might, again, speak to what an employer might be looking for. So yeah, no, that's a great point.
There was also a question in the chat if they should list some of the SQL training that they've done on the resume. And absolutely, just show that you've taken a little bit of initiative. And even if you don't pay for the certification, just say that you did the class. It's I think it shows initiative, it shows interest.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what I was speaking about before. Any of that kind of extracurricular stuff, that absolutely can highlight exactly the kind of traits that an employer might be looking for.
Yeah, I would throw in a caveat there that you could put on your resume that you have certain kinds of technical skills, but there's a strong possibility that during the interview process, you will be tested to make sure that you actually have the skills that you claim to have. And that is really important. Never exaggerate your skills. Don't underplay them, but don't exaggerate them either. Why? Hires like Stephen can see through that in about 10 seconds, and it won't do you any favors.
No, that's a great point, Trudy. And I'll just add, I specifically to that point, I mean, if we're hiring for a data developer, you will get a homework assignment, and we will absolutely test your skill set when it comes to that kind of stuff. So yes, be honest. Don't oversell.
Yeah.
But absolutely, the kinds of things like all the micro credentials and all those kinds of things that all counts, in terms of building a picture.
I'll also add that, in our interview process, we also ask technical questions. And I think, some of our best hires, they just said, I honestly don't know. And can you tell me what the answer is, or can you show me? And I think that really shows that they're willing to learn, and you don't have to know everything. But if you try to lie about it, it doesn't come off well.
Right. No, that's absolutely correct. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. If you ever actually sit down and interview with me, that's one of the points I will emphasize is if you don't know, that's okay. Ask the question, right? And get the answer, but don't try to bluff your way through anything, because it won't get you very far. It'll catch up with you in the end. So no, that's really good advice.
Write that down, everybody. Don't bluff. Really, I hire so many people too, and bluffing is just terrible because now you're on the blacklist. I'm going to share an article in the chat right now that talks about what's happening as a result of using AI in some of the hiring platforms. And when Stephen said, don't broadcast 200 job applications using the same resume, this article tells you exactly why that is a terrible idea and why you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. Prepare for job applications, you have to prepare just as much as if you were preparing to write an exam or if you were preparing to talk to somebody very, very important. These applications are incredibly critical to your success.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing, and it might seem obvious, but take a bit of time to learn about the company you're applying for, right? And think about that as well. So not just through the lens of the specific job posting you might be chasing, but do a little research on the company. One of the first questions that might come up is, what have you heard about us, and what do you know about us, right? And it's a very basic question, but if you come in prepared with just even some basics about what the company does and what they're up to and that kind of thing, that can go a long way as well as making a really good positive impression, and it shows that you're willing to go out and prepare and be ready for things.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question, and I'll remind everybody, put your questions into the question meeting chat so we can answer them. But things have changed dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years, especially since the end of COVID, the implementation of a lot of remote technology like we're using right now, the way people are hired, the way people work, etc. How has that impacted the way you look at new prospective employees? And I'll ask both of you to answer that question.
Kim, do you want to go first, or?
Sorry, could you repeat some of that?
So,
That was a long question.
So the emergence of new technology and new human
Right.
expectations about what work looks like for them, how has that changed what you're looking for in an employee? So before COVID, everybody was expected to be in the office 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Now you tell people they have to be in the office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to go check some of my other options. And those expectations are what people expect back from you, because this is a two-way street, right? If you're going to hire somebody, but they're basically hiring who they're going to work for, and that has to be a mutually beneficial relationship.
I'd say true, there's a lot of things that you can do remotely, but I don't think there's any replacement for the human-to-human interaction. In our office, we are required to be in office 5 days a week. But like I think, especially if you're trying to learn or if you're trying to work as a team, there's just so much more value that you get, in the chatters after the meeting is done, or like in the hallways, rather than kind of on through a virtual engagement. Like I yeah, I see the appeal in having a little bit of flexibility, but yeah, I do think you would learn so much more just by building relationships and learning from your colleagues, and you also have more opportunity to share some of the cool things that you're interested in and like, and those don't necessarily come up in a meeting, because you wouldn't really put on a meeting about a cool app you just built. It's just something you kind of talk about by the coffee machine. And and I've learned a lot from the people that I've worked with, just their interactions and seeing what they're interested in and what they do in their evenings and weekends. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and maybe to build on that, like, so we're a little different here at Geologic. We have a flex schedule, so we're in office 3 days a week, and we have 2 work from home days, and some of that is role dependent. There's depending on what you're doing. Our sales team, for example, are in the office a bit more often because they have to be available and go see folks in person. But everything Kim mentioned is still true, right? And the reason we didn't go like full remote or any more remote than we are was that there is real value in those in-person meetings and again off schedule conversations and things like that. And there's also real value in being able to just kind of lean over to the person next to you in the next desk over to ask a quick question, or check on something or anything like that. I mean, especially when we're onboarding new people, and we're very upfront about this, is that we expect them and their buddy to be in the office a bit more often in the early days, specifically for those reasons. It's a critical part of the process is getting you up to speed, and there's real value in having someone quite literally at your hip to help you through that and help you through the training and everything. So that part of it, yeah, I mean, it'll vary from place to place, but I think I know of companies that are fully remote and they make that work. It really is going to depend on the company and the approach. But big picture, I tend to agree. I think there is real value with in-person stuff. Now, in terms of the technology angle to the question, I think technology it's constantly evolving. I mean, and maybe this is a good time to touch on AI specifically in this case, because what we're finding is that the improvements in that technology, it's almost been hard to keep up. We kicked off a pilot about 3 years ago, and we've had to sort of adjust as the technology's improved, and really revamp our processes almost on the fly, because things kept getting better and faster. And we were doing a vision-based, a text-based extraction process, for example, on some documents and digitizing them that way, and ended up pivoting to a vision-based because that angle of the AI technology just got sort of leapfrogged in terms of accuracy. So it kind of goes back to some of the core values I touched on it earlier, which is being flexible, being willing to learn, being willing to adjust, and kind of not get stuck in a particular way of doing things, because technology is constantly evolving. It is a cliche at this point, but in terms of the way we've approached it, it's that AI won't take your job, but someone using AI might. And that's kind of been the lens that we look at it. Like, it's not that we're necessarily replacing people with an AI process, but what it is that the person's job might have gone from, straight, I'm data entering something from a PDF into a database, and then we have processes in place to check for outliers, and they go in and fix them. To it's an AI process that's extracting that text into a database, and that person isn't doing the data entry anymore, but what they are doing is the data validation, because all of this, from a data perspective, and you'll hear this a lot too in your journey into the data space, is that, again, a cliche, but it's garbage in, garbage out. Data quality is still critical to everything, and the energy industry and any industry really, the quality of the data matters so much. So you can speed things up, you can streamline, you can make things happen faster. But AI hasn't gotten to the point where, another thing that bounces around the office a lot is, use AI, but don't trust it, right? The validation of what happens is still a critical part of what we do. So it's not so much, I think, that people need to feel threatened by it, but I think they do need to be willing to adjust and change sort of their workflows and their approaches as technology continues to grow and change.
And I think
I'd be
tying
curious.
AI.
Oh, sorry, please.
Oh, yeah, I guess
No, I was just going to
tying
ask you.
AI back to the remote work question. Like, I just, with how prevalent AI is getting, we're really starting to lose more and more of like the human aspect of like just life. So, while I do see the value in remote work, and with our team, we have lost a lot of potentially really good people because we don't have that flexibility. But I just think, it's if we were fully remote, I would just find it really sad that my job or my career is just fulfilling a checklist of tasks that are my job, and that's it. It's like, when people say, oh, there's nothing I couldn't do at home that that is part of my job, but I just find that kind of sad. I think I would have more enjoyment in my job to be able to interact and engage with other people and the work itself, especially because we're here for so many hours a day and for so many years in our lives that, like, it's just I just don't know if I'd have the same job satisfaction if it was just kind of fully remote, and if I woke up every morning knowing that I just got to get like this checklist of 20 things done and that's my job and that's it. So that's my 2 cents, I guess, on the remote work thing.
Tim, before
It would
we
be nice if we had a little
continue,
flexibility, but we don't.
Tim, I don't know if everybody else is getting your image has got a little strange. Can you try just turning your camera on and off?
Oh, sure.
Let's see, I don't know if a few people are seeing what I'm seeing.
Okay.
Oh, that's way better. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I think
Is
your
it a little
camera
lag?
just had a moment there.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Was everyone able to hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we've got a comment. Thank you for asking about the emergence of new technology and remote work. And one point I want to make that I think really emphasizes what Stephen and Kim have been saying is that data has to last in many cases for decades, in some cases for centuries. And the technology that you'll be using to access and make decisions with the data is going to constantly change. Our purpose in these data competencies is to make sure that as we're moving data between technologies, we don't accidentally mess it up and we don't create an environment where we might misinterpret it because the technology has skewed the data in a certain way. So there has to be some freedom there. You have to use technology, but 10 years from now, you'll be using the same data, but new technology. And you'll hopefully be doing things better. And 100 years from now, your grandchildren will be using exactly the same data, and they'll be using super cool holographic technology or something like that. And it's going to be even more powerful. So keep that in mind, that data is not technology. It needs technology, but it is not defined by technology. And I think that's a misapprehension that many people have, is that to work with data, you have to be a programmer. You have to know a lot of coding skills. A lot of coding skills will help you to access the data, but they do not become the data. It's kind of a separation there. So let's go on here. If somebody was to think to themselves, gosh, this sounds wonderful, and what I really want to do is pursue a career, and what we know is that these data competencies span a lot of different jobs in a lot of different industries. We're talking here in the energy industry, but in agriculture, in healthcare, in education, in retail, in every industry, the same needs for data are existing. So if these people want to get themselves into a data role and start preparing, what are the things you think they should do over the next 2 or 3 months or 4 months to get themselves ready, including, of course, taking the classes that we're offering at the end of this to try to get people some of those core competencies that they need to have. So what would you suggest?
I would say if you're already working, just think of the problems that you're already trying to solve. Like, if you're in accounting or land, just think of some of the repetitive tasks that you do that are repeatable and repetitive, and see how you can automate that with whatever tools you have. And I think that's one step in just trying to do something different and trying to build some data skills and do your job while still adding value and trying to make it more efficient in the long term. So I guess in short, maybe find where some of the pain points are, find somewhere the inefficiencies are that you think you could solve using better data practices. Or even in your life. I mean, there's lots of data in your regular life too.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think even coming at it from a slightly different perspective is, I spoke about data quality before, and I think that's really, really important. I think finding out, how data is being used, familiarizing yourself with, how companies are leveraging it. How has that changed over time, and what's being, what's sort of emphasized now versus even a few years ago, right? I mean, again, it is constantly changing. So trying to stay on top of that is really important. It's and to your day-to-day life or your current work as well. Like, Kim made a great point about finding those pain points in terms of process and your repetitive tasks, but also think about it in terms of how good is the data you're using. If you're constantly finding errors or finding outliers, think about ways that you could identify and clean those up. Right. I mean, the most basic example of this, and it's something it's almost just muscle memory at this point for us in terms of what we do, but think of a very simple, a stream of data or a particular data set and a basic bell curve, right? The outliers on each side are probably the one, the points where you need to spend a bit of time, because it's not, data on its own, if it's unreliable or untrustworthy, doesn't do you much good. So thinking about it in terms of how you can make that data better is going to be a great sort of mindset for trying to get into this space, because that's a big part of it. One of the things we talk about a lot is, you can build up trust in the data that we provide, or that the data that you use. It can get lost in a second. And if you start to think that the data you're using isn't reliable, that can put a strain on everything. So I think that's a good thing to think about as well, is how can you make the data you're using better?
Yeah. There's also, I follow a lot of data things on LinkedIn, and I always see that there are data events. I think YYC Data, or the YYC DataCon is a group that I forgot what they're actually called, something along those lines. They have lots of data events.
I know what you're talking about.
They hold hackathons, and SPE, Society of Petroleum Engineers, holds an annual datathon, and it usually starts with some boot camp sessions followed by like a competition where you could practice what you've learned. And there's always I think there's always cash prizes too. So I mean, that's just something fun and really grows your skills and interests as well.
Great.
Yes,
I think these are
YYC
great
Data
questions.
Society. That's the right one. Thanks.
There they are. Thanks, Blaine.
They have a conference called YYC DataCon. That's why it's in my head.
That's the one.
Okay. And we're not
I would
getting a
follow
lot of
those guys. They have really cool
questions.
stuff.
Please ask your questions. Yes, Data Calgary. So the leader of the Data Calgary group is Mark Nolte. I've known Mark for a long time. He knows a lot about data as well. And we're hoping to have him on this series here coming up in the near future. Okay, so in the absence of questions, I hope everybody is riveted with fascination. Well, Melina, is it worth getting the DAMA certification? So DAMA is a broad industry neutral certification that validates your data specific skills. What do you think?
I mean, I'm a data practitioner. I've personally never heard of it, but I mean, I'm sure it doesn't hurt. Sorry. It's not something I would look for personally, but
Right.
you know, having it on your resume couldn't hurt.
Yeah, I
Although
think
if you
that's
do
it.
use
I'm
it,
not
I would
familiar
say
with
what
it.
it is, just so that if
Right.
you know, a potential employer would know what you've learned in it and well,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not familiar
what
with
can
it
be.
either, but I agree. I think it's something that again, it shows that willingness to learn, and it's a bit more information for you. And if it makes you a little bit better, I think it's absolutely worth pursuing.
Right. So the DEMA certification is a fairly rigorous multi-part exam that certifies your capability amongst several different dimensions of data capabilities and competencies, and those are all very important. PPDM also has a certification for data, and that's specific to data in the energy industry. So
That's
those,
and I'm glad you brought that one up because I was going to mention. I know we've got a lot of folks here at Geologic that have gone through it, and I think that's a really good one to look into as well.
yeah.
So if it's similar to that, yeah, I think it's absolutely a good idea.
So certifications are really useful to have. Think about the certifications that you've got and what you like to do, right? I mean, if you absolutely hate, loathe, and despise anything that looks like programming, and every time Kim mentions SQL or Python or something, you wanted to vomit, you know, there are many data competencies and disciplines that do not require those kinds of technical coding. The data competencies span a very broad set of jobs, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later. There's something for everybody, but it's important for you to know yourselves and what you like to do, the kinds of things that you're capable. Stephen said, attention to detail. That's really important. Data people have to have a lot of attention to detail. They have to have an attitude of curiosity to look at something that doesn't look right and not go, huh, I wonder what they'll do when they see that and just not worry about it, as opposed to, well, that is obviously extremely weird. I'm going to find out what happened and see whether or not that's actually right or whether it's wrong and whether or not we can actually get that fixed. The determination, the attention to detail, the curiosity, the ability to go do that kind of research are important attitudes and aptitudes that we're looking for in data professionals. So we're not just looking for what you learn, what they used to call book learning, right? The stuff you write tests on, but your attitudes to how you work, your aptitudes, the kinds of things that you're good at, the kinds of things that you care about. You need to understand yourself in terms of what those are as well. So when you're searching for a job, not only research the company you want to look for a job with, but think about yourself as a person too and what's right for you.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, and it's another quick example maybe, but the type of, and I think it ties to curiosity, but it also shows initiative is, if you do find an outlier or you find something that doesn't look quite right, and then you go in and you figure it out and you fix it, that's not the end of it, right? Does this exist anywhere else? And it's expanding that scope to go see like, well, where else could this be a problem? Like, oh, this pressure value that was captured was above 10,000. Well, that's not right. It could never exceed 1,500. Well, hey, maybe I can go talk to a data developer. They can write me a script because I don't know quite how to do that, or they can show me how, and then I can go in and I can find anything else above that 1,500 threshold and dig into that and find those, and that kind of just sort of second nature initiative to sort of want to solve the problem, not just the initial one, but resolve it broadly is the kind of kind of almost an instinct that is really valuable in this space, right? And think about that, if you are sitting down in an interview, it's thinking of examples of that maybe in your life that could apply, and that would show a prospective employer that this person's got that kind of the mindset that they're looking for.
And not everybody thinks the same way.
No, that's very true.
Is there any questions out there? I'm tempted to try a little experiment. We have quite a few of you online, and if you all have access to the chat, would you type in the way that makes sense to you today's date? Just type it into the chat.
While we're doing that, I think I see a question from Faz about, can you elaborate on roles where you don't need to know SQL and Python? You know, if programming and coding just makes you want to vomit, I think there are so many with AI and all the new tools out there. There's so many ways around it. I would recommend, so Databricks has an agent where you can just ask it in plain English what you're trying to query, and it will translate your text to SQL based on what's in your Databricks database. It's really neat. Like we've got so many engineers here who they started creating their own notebooks, and they're writing, well, they're not writing Python or SQL, they're just asking the agent, this is what I'm trying to do, and it starts to build these notebooks, and it'll get you like not perfect, like maybe a 70% result right now. I'm sure it's only going to get better. So if you have a chance, I would definitely recommend getting that free Databricks. I forgot what they call it, like a community edition or something. I don't know if the agent is included in that, but it probably should be. Try it out. It's really, really neat. So yeah, again, like we have so many citizen developers that are just using the AI agent right now to do a lot of those things. And you know, it just shows an extra resourcefulness where, you know, you don't have the skills yet, but you know what you're trying to achieve. And you found another path to it. So hopefully that answers your question, Faz.
Okay. So now I've seen quite a few people have put dates in. Now have a look at those. And there are almost as many different versions or formats for that date as there are people who entered it. And this is very indicative of the kind of thing that data professionals need to look at. Dates are a particular problem for, that's why I picked dates as an example. Yes. But if you have a data system and they have dates in all of those different systems, and you've got to be able to sort that out, how are you going to do it? How are you going to make sense out of that, especially 260616? There's an interesting one, right? There are so many ways of writing dates. And when your data systems contain all these different ways of forming dates, or when your incoming data has all these different formats, we start running into ambiguity. And your data skills help you to identify that. You should look at all those different formats and go, huh, isn't that interesting? I wonder if that's impacting any of my data systems. So like this, my kid's birthday is June the 4th. It depends on where you are. We actually wrote an 18-page paper about the problems with date formats. You can find it on the PPDM website. You don't have to be a member. Just go in and look for it, or send me a question if you can't find it. And people just can't believe that there's that much to know about dates. But data professionals, we look for these kinds of challenges to resolve them so that they don't create ambiguity in our data systems. It's really interesting. So that's just a tiny little bit of insight into some of the things we look at as data professionals. There's a question here. What is your greatest asset as a data analyst or professional? Stephen, you first.
Oh, I think it's my greatest asset. I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this right, but it's taking real pride and ownership in what we produce. And I think that comes across in everyone from entry level all the way to, you know, I'm the director here, and we take ownership and real pride in what we deliver. And I think that shows, right? So I think that, and it goes back also to the stuff I talked about before, that the curiosity, the attention to detail, and communication, but ultimately that's what it boils down to. I think is that we genuinely care that what we're delivering is providing our clients with real solutions to the problems they have, and it matters to us.
Great answer. You have 30 seconds, Kim.
Sure. Yeah, I think my greatest asset is being able to dissect what the users want, and seeing the big picture and understanding what we're actually trying to achieve. Because I work with so many people who've worked in the industry for many, many years, and they might be asking for ABC, but it takes a really good data practitioner to understand, well, what they're actually trying to achieve is XYZ instead. Like where they don't really know that it's possible, but they just think there's one solution. I think being able to understand what they're actually trying to achieve and coming up with, a more modern or a more maybe elegant solution is probably a great asset.
Great. Okay. if there's no questions, it is time for us to turn ourselves back over to Blaine.
Oh, and we just got a question too. What advice would you give to a computer science undergrad who's trying to break into data analytics, especially since projects can only mostly demonstrate technical skills and can hardly demonstrate core/soft skills deemed highly valuable?
I'd say build a network, because, and again, this comes back to the in-person idea where, I can meet somebody who I could really connect with or seems like they know what they're talking about, and I would have no idea what their hard skills or technical skills would be. I'd say, when we look for people on our team, we're looking for people who'd be great fits, not necessarily the people with the best technical skills. So building a network, getting out there, getting out from behind your screen.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I think that's right. Getting out there.
I'd say just because they don't ask you about your soft skills doesn't mean they're not thinking about them and noticing them. It's one of those soft, fuzzy things that some people are uncomfortable writing down. But it definitely is something you observe in an interview, and certainly in job performance. Those attitudes and aptitudes come to the front really quickly.
Yeah, Trudy, that I was just just really briefly, but because it just resonates, because it's something that I bring up in interviews all the time, and I wish people would include when they apply, is talk about a win, right? Talk about something that you used your technical skills and knowledge to accomplish, right? Not just that I know this programming code, or I know this language, or I worked on this project, but what were the results? What problem did you solve? How did you apply it? How did you apply it exactly? How did you, take it a step further, right? What else did you do with it? Like if you can highlight some of that stuff, whether it's in a school project or it's in the workforce, or with your soccer team, you were gathering stats for your kids' hockey team, and you tracked the whatever it might be, but sort of highlighting that kind of stuff, that speaks directly to some of those sort of what you'd call soft skills. So anyway, I know I'm kind of on time, so
it's a great story to include in the cover letter.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Our next session is next Tuesday, if you can believe that. It's coming up really fast and furious. So our registration right now is open for all of the next sessions on the unlockdatacareers.org website under info sessions. I'll also include links to register for the future sessions in the follow-up email to this, along with Kim's links that she so generously put together for everyone, and more information about the session. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And
you
thank
know
you,
who
Blaine,
we are. You
for
can find
organizing.
me on LinkedIn if you want to ask questions. I'm always ready to answer questions.
Yeah.
Same with me.
Me too. Same.
All of their LinkedIn profiles are linked in the event page for this session.
Very good.
All right.
It's our
Have a great
pleasure
week,
to be
everyone.
helpful.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.